has given me familiarity. But I just want to say that I applaud the actions of Congress in standing up and expressing itself on this issue. I applaud what other public figures have done. But at the end of the day, Congress and the administration must go beyond resolutions and written things. We have to be a lot more forceful. This is a serious humanitarian matter, and we cannot sit back and simply condemn violence, whether something that happened before or something that happens in the future. I believe this: if we could rally the international community to prevent a slaughter in Libya, as one of the earlier speakers said, surely it would seem we could do the same here, and we must do that. As some of you know, I am an Arab American. My family's heritage is Lebanese. My grandparents came to this country really around the turn of the last century in search of a better life, and frankly because there was oppression in the places they lived and they were greatly threatened. So in our heritage, our experience is so much like yours. When I was a public official, as a candidate and so on, I had the chance to work on many causes that related to my heritage. And I won't go into all of them here, but I want to use one really as both an example of something that has happened that I was part of, and maybe as a source of some encouragement to what you are trying to do. When I came to the Senate in 1994, it was about 11 years after the bombing of U.S. Marine soldiers in Lebanon. As an individual of Lebanese ancestry and now as a public figure, I felt obviously a certain high degree of sensitivity because of what had happened. Every time there was a story about people from Lebanon or Lebanese history in the media, the focus was on things about Lebanon that hardly made me feel good. So I know what it must feel like sitting where you are sitting today. But I also believe that there was a chance to change the U.S. relationship with Lebanon, and that it needed to be changed, that there needed to be more engagement, that we needed to address problems that could help to both, on one hand, improve the bilateral relationship, but more importantly, to help set Lebanon on a hopefully better course. One of the big issues which we were dealing with was just opening up the ability for American citizens to travel to Lebanon, which, as some of you remember, was prohibited at that time. It seemed to me like a pretty straightforward matter. You had literally millions of Americans of Lebanese heritage, many with families that were in Lebanon who could not legally go to visit. It didn't mean they didn't go to visit. Members of virtually every family found ways to get there. But it wasn't a very comfortable situation, and it posed a lot of threat. So I went to work, and in the Senate, and I won't say this was a solo effort. We had other great allies who had knowledge of the situation or their own Lebanese heritage connections. But it was a process to try to educate colleagues and to inform them and get them to better understand what the stakes were and why it made sense to change. It was a hard road, and it really required a lot of perseverance. And the reason I'm talking about this story in particular is because the place where we had the greatest degree of resistance was at the Department of State. At every other place that I went to try to find support and to find assistance from the House to the Senate, from the Congress, to the other parts of the executive branch, to the public arena, people understood why it made sense to change. But at the Department of State, they didn't. And every 6 months, the policy was reviewed, and every 6 months, year after year, the idea of lifting the travel ban was rejected. And the reasons for rejection were as confusing, as legally dubious, and frankly had as many sort of political overtones to them as some of the reasons that we're hearing about things regarding the MEK and Camp Ashraf today. My message to you is this: you face these same challenges and you must remain determined. We remain determined. Our cause was important to us. It was not the threat of consequences, and the magnitude of the consequences, I admit, were not as great as what they are in terms of the victims here. But there were clearly opportunities, if we could have lifted the ban and started to more normalize relationships, to protect people who were sick and could not get help and whose families couldn't get to them to provide support. And so I urge you on. Fortunately, you have very strong congressional allies who now believe in this cause and are with you. Fortunately, you have an incredible cast of opinion leaders on your side. And as several of the speakers said, any doubt about whether or not this is a valid case, that this is a credible argument, is, in my judgment, punctured by just a simple examination of the kinds of people who've studied the evidence and concluded that this cause makes sense. And more importantly, you have a strong moral case. As strong a moral case, it would seem, as you could possibly have. And you have really the forces of history on your side. And so I say to you today that while there may be moments when this seems frustrating, there may even be moments when it seems fruitless, it is time to persevere. There will be success, I believe. It will not happen maybe as soon as you want, but it will not happen unless you continue forcing the issue, moving ahead, educating people, and letting your voices be heard. Ultimately, in 1998, our voices were heard. Ultimately, the Department of State, perhaps because of our compelling arguments, perhaps because of the embarrassing weakness of their position, perhaps for other reasons, I don't know, reversed itself and lifted the travel ban. And I